So, hi everyone, and welcome once again. In today's class, we will be discussing about India, the wages, the unemployment effect, the economy of India in the current scenario. Now, as we know, due to the COVID pandemic, the economy is on a bit of a decline, and there are measures and parameters being taken to increase and to sustain the economy to a growth level that it doesn't go into a recession. And the government has introduced many schemes, and people are trying. But again, we do find, especially when the pandemic started last year, a lot of people started losing their jobs, and that has to do more with the fact that output had decreased. There was not much demand. There was not much aggregate demand for having certain goods and services, and therefore, as that demand fell, there was no rise in price level, or there was no motivation for those suppliers to bring in an output, and that in turn resulted in a lot of people losing their jobs. Now, when we talk about employment in India, it's always been a debate between the wages, the higher wages and lower wages in India. And in that segment itself, you have had the discussion on the macroeconomic impact of the higher or lower wages, which is an age-old debate which has been going on for a long time. And in those debates, the battle lines are usually drawn on an ideological basis. The left usually argues that higher wages expand the domestic market by increasing the purchasing power of those with the highest capability to consume. That's the left's argument. Whereas the right usually argues that the higher wages are the first step in an inflationary spiral as companies respond to an increase in employee costs by increasing their prices of their products. So it's a very fine line which the government and which economists have to tread in order to ensure that inflation doesn't kill the economy. Also, at the same time, ensuring that wages are given to the people. Now, before wages are given to the people, as I said, we'll come upon to the topic of unemployment. Unemployment is something which is affecting a lot of people, especially during this pandemic and during the times when recession hits it. So today with me, I have three young students who have researched on this topic, and they are Advaith Subash, Ashik Shaju, and Antony Varghese of grade 11 from Devamala CMI International School in Thrissur. And maybe they can enlighten all of us in today's words. And so, guys, what's your take on the unemployment sector right now? What's happening? Maybe you can fill us on that.
So I'll start by talking about the what is unemployment. So basically,
Yeah, sure, Advaith.
unemployment is a term referring to individuals who are employable and actively seeking a job, but are unable to find a job. So there can be a lot of reason why this is happening. I'll get into that. Before that, the present unemployment rate is at 7.4%, but when we are comparing to the whole population of India, it is a huge number. A lot of reasons have affected the employment rate recently. One of the main reasons is the lockdown due to the pandemic. The rapidly increasing in the size of the population have also caused an increase in unemployment. India is only the largest, the seventh largest country in the world, but we are growing to be the largest populated country by 2025. Much larger countries have lower population and low unemployment rate. Another reason why we have a higher unemployment rate is job specialization. Jobs in the capitalist world have become highly specialized, but Indian education system does not provide the right training and specialization needed to these jobs. Thus, many people who are willing to work became unemployable due to the lack of skills. There are more reasons to it. For example, we have
If I
low
can
economic.
just, sorry, Advait, to interrupt, but that's a very valid point, I think, which you said there, that a lot of people started losing their jobs because of the lack of job skills, the lack of job specialization. And do you think that it has affected a lot in our economy?
Yes,
That
sir.
the lack.
Definitely, because if you don't have the skill for a job, we cannot actually do it. And our Indian school system mostly focuses on sciences and commerce and humanities, and we are not developing a skill required for some jobs. So I think it is actually a valid reason why a lot of people are unemployed, and a lot of
Okay.
multinational companies are not coming to India.
Makes sense. Makes absolutely sense. I mean, yes, Advaith, you can continue. You were saying something.
Yeah, also another reasons would be low economic growth in India and also labor mobility.
Yep, it does. It does. Labor mobility is a huge factor in this current scenario. Where can you move? You're basically restricted in your area or in most probably in the four walls of your house. So labor mobility is a huge issue, and as Abdul rightly pointed out, most of these factors have contributed towards unemployment. But the good news is that we are almost at the end of the tunnel. There's a bright light shining at the end of the tunnel, and in the recent figures which have come out last month, the IT sector, especially in India, is hiring. The medical sector in India and also across the world is hiring. They're requiring a lot number of people. And when you get in these lakhs and of candidates who are coming in, who have just gone maybe the lowest period of their life ever during this pandemic, how do you rejuvenate them? How do you re-energize them to perform better? And for that, I think is something which is very important and which needs to be stressed upon. All companies have to take measures to re-energize and remotivate them, to remotivate those employees who have maybe lost their jobs earlier, or who in the last 1 year have had the low some of the most difficult and pressing times of their life. So motivation is one factor when you think about employment, which I feel has not been given its due importance. And what are your guys take on that? How do you think motivation is there motivation in the Indian economy in your research when you found out?
So, motivation is a desire to achieve a certain goal. So
Okay,
when
Ashik.
people are motivated, people are motivated, they take the initiative and work hard to reach their goals. So a motivated workforce is more productive, helps a company achieve its goals, and is crucial to reducing absenteeism and turnover. If an employee is motivated, they are more likely to do a good job and work harder to reach their goals. And motivation is a very important for attracting employees, retaining employees, and gender levels of productivity in a business. Motivated employees are more likely to be willing to work rather than staying off. Motivation reflects something unique about each one of us and allows us to gain valued outcomes like improved performance, enhanced well being, personal growth, or a sense of purpose. Motivation is also a path to change our way of thinking, feeling, and behaving.
Right, yeah. So those are the psychological factors. But how is the motivation scenario here in India? Have you guys researched on that? Any companies, like, how have you seen the motivation coming across? For example, I've known, I think I can't exactly remember the name of the company, but there was a cosmetic company which kind of paid a huge salary or a one-time lump sum salary for their people during the pandemic. So that actually counts as motivation. You're telling the employee that you're valuable, and that is an absolute motivator for the employee. We have had a lot of theories of motivation. You had theories by Taylor which said that pay is one of the most important motivator for any employee. But there were also other theorists like Herzberg, like Mayo, who said that it's not just pay, but it's all the theories, it's all the factors, different factors like recognition, like giving importance to a person, that all these factors are taken into it. So yes, there are certain companies which have gone overboard, I would say, not over the board, but have gone the extra mile to take care of their employees. And I'm pretty sure there are other companies also coming in with more such things. So you have companies who are paying in providing benefits like maybe a car, or a rent has been paid for 4 to 5 months in certain companies to support their employees, which is kind of a good deed. It rejuvenates the employee to work harder when they come back. But having said this, at the end, I kind of agree with what F.W. Taylor said in his theory of motivation. At the end of the day, humans require a good pay. And what is a good pay? That's kind of the always the fine balance that the HR department and the candidate always treads upon. What makes a good pay? What pay will I be satisfied? For what I feel, no pay will satisfy anyone because you're always wanting something more, and which is a good sign because that shows that you are trying to move ahead. If you just be content with what you're getting, you are not going to grow at any stage. So I was reading an article which was written by one of our speakers here today, Antony, who researched more on the statistics, who researched more on how the national minimum wage in India is. And Anthony, I would actually like you to shed some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. I'll shed my light on the topic. So, personally, I'm someone who greatly believes that statistics don't lie, and in the case of India, this is 100% true. So, the national minimum wage in India has significantly decreased due to the pandemic, and now 230 million people have been pushed to a wage below the national minimum wage of 365 rupees per day. If the pandemic had not occurred, poverty would have declined by 5% in rural areas and by 1.5% in urban areas. The average income of an Indian household also fell during this time. Although our country is making strides to becoming a global superpower, poverty is still a huge issue in our country. As of 2021, there are 8.4 million people living in extreme poverty in our country. This is around 6% of the population. Another problem we face in India is the high level of inequality in the distribution of income. The simplest way to understand the inequality is by analyzing the population and by dividing it into quintiles from the poorest to the richest and reporting the proportions of income held by them. In an ideal world, the bottom 20% of the population would hold 20% of the economy's income, but this isn't the case at all. In reality, 20% of the bottom population hardly have 3% of the economy's income. Surprisingly, though, the Gini coefficient of India is 35.15. This is lower than countries such as China, Russia, and the US. This shows us that the income inequality in India is lower than countries like some major countries. And I found this quite surprising, but I guess you could say the stats never lie.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And just for our listeners, the Gini coefficient, which Anthony just mentioned, it's actually a measure of the distribution of income across population, which was designed by an Italian statistician, Corrado Gini, in 1912. So that is what the Gini coefficient, which is used by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to measure the distribution of income. And it's a real surprise, isn't it, that we find the income disequality, or sorry, the income inequality rather, being so widely spread. As Anthony said, the ideal would be 20% of the population having 20% of the income. But here we see 20% of the population having less than five, or he said almost 3% of the income, which means that the income is there. The income of a country is largely concentrated with a very small segment of the population. And that again brings about the debate of wages. What is the right wage? Do you pay more? If you pay more, the prices, the demand rises, and the prices are to rise, and there's an inflation threat looming ahead. Or is it that if you pay more, then everyone comes equally, you are unable to supply that much output of goods in the market? So, this is maybe something our economists and all of you listeners should be thinking about. What is the solution for this? Where does India move forward, or how does India move forward in the days to come, in its wages, in its position of dealing with unemployment? And moreover, how do we motivate our workforce in this current pandemic and in this current scenario to have more productivity, where we have all been so compressed in our mindsets? We've all been so compressed into our surroundings. with the loom of the COVID pandemic. So these are few thoughts, and I thank Antony, Advaith, and Ashik for sharing their thoughts on this podcast. So thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all to all the listeners for listening. This is your host Joel. Till next week, where we have a greater topic with some new panelists. Have a great week ahead.